So grab your number 10s. You should have 5 of those. And we're going to start stitching it together at the sides. For one of them, we're doing the overskirt. So for one of them, we're going to leave an opening above the notch in one of the seams. I have the first 2 here. I'm matching it on the seam, on the notch here. And I'm going to pin it and then sew it. Then add another panel because right now there's so many pieces and they're large and it's a little overwhelming to deal with so much fabric all at once. So I'm going to go little section by section. Right sides together, I'm going to stitch it down now. So here is the first layer. And you must have caught on by now that I don't like leaving my seams unfinished. So I'm going to trim it and run a zigzag stitch just to give it a nicer finish. Look how much nicer it looks this way versus just leaving it incomplete. I wish that patterns would give you the suggested finishing for seams. Another finished seam. And now I'm gonna add another layer. Okay, at this point I have attached all the layers and I press the opening at 5/8 and I put a pin in it just to keep it, just to remember where it is so it'll be easier to find because there is a lot of layers of fabric. So now I'm going to gather the upper edge of the overskirt, breaking stitch at the seam. I guess I'll start gathering on here and then I'll just keep going around. Well, to be completely honest, I'm not 100% sure what the pattern means by breaking the stitch at the seam. So what I'm going to do is at each seam, I'm going to, right before hitting the seam, I'm going to stop and start new again past the stitch, past the seam. So I reached my seam here. I am going to break that. Leaving a long tail at all every time I stop, and then I'm gonna start again on this layer. I'm just gonna do that all around because that's what break a seam sounds like to me. I'm not sure. Pretty much it's not a continuous stitch. I'm not doing a continuous gather stitch. I'm stopping every time I hit a new panel. So right before I get to this little portion where the seam begins, right here, I would stop right here, right before it, and then begin right after it. Here's the seam, I flip it over and I start a new seam line, a new gather line here. So again, it's not continuous. If it were continuous, I would just go over it. But instead, I'm skipping over it. Now that that's done, I'm going to start gathering. This fabric frays a lot. I should have run a zigzag stitch across before starting. Okay, so after a whole lot of readjustment and gathering and more gathering and more gathering, I was finally able to fit the overskirt evenly onto the bodice. So here's my bodice facing right side to right side. on the edge of the bodice and the edge of the overskirt, I pinned it together. Again, you have to really, really, really bring the gathers together in order to get it to fit around. But I finally did that, and now I am going to baste. So I'm going to start on one of the center backs and then make my way all the way around. I am basting at 1/2 inch. Not because the instructions indicated, just because it's my preference. It's my preference. The final stitch is gonna be on 5/8, so I just don't want this basting stitch to show or give me extra work and having to cover it or take it out later on. So that's why I'm going for the 1/2 inch. Oh, there is a pin. This skirt is so full that it's very hard to see the pins or even feel for the pins. So at this point, the overskirt is attached to the bodice. Now we're going to move on to pattern piece 8 and 9. Okay, so let's start with pattern piece number 9. You should have 2. Place them right side to right side, so facing each other, the right sides. And we're going to stitch the center back from the notch down. This part stays open. So this is my center back here. So I'm going to stitch from here all the way down. I'm going to pin it first, just to make sure everything stays together. I'm going to start stitching here, and I'm going to make sure to back stitch and reinforce that notch / seam all the way down. So I'm going to cut only the seam from here down a little bit so that I can zigzag stitch. Okay, and now we open up number 9 and we bring number 8. Right side to right side. We're gonna stitch at the sides, matching the notch. Okay, so at this point I have pinned down the sides of 8 and 9. 8 and 9 are now pinned down at the sides, and I'm gonna do a straight stitch down. Again, I keep on saying it throughout the video, but just in case, add 5/8 of an inch. And I'm gonna do the same thing I've been doing with the seam, cutting it and then zigzagging to make sure that my fabric doesn't fray and just to give it a much nicer finish. I'm not gonna add in this part because it's getting too repetitive and I don't want this video to, drag out longer than it needs to. So I'm just going to start stitching, and then once this step is done, we will continue. Okay, so next we're doing the skirt, the hem. It says press up skirt hem. The hem is 1 1/4. So we're gonna fold over 1 1/4, and then we'll take 1/4, fold it over, and then that will be your stitch line, that 1/4. So fold it up 1 1/4, pressing all along. Okay, so now that I did the 1 1/4, I am folding over approximately 1/4, maybe a little more, but just as long as I got the one measurement here. I'm measuring across and I'm folding over 1/4, and I'm pinning it down just so that everything will stay in place and it'll be easier for me to stitch down the hem. And there we have it. The hem is now done. On the front. Done. Now we move on to 34, which is the lining. I am ready to do my lining. I'm sorry I look a mess. And then I realized I did not cut lining. And I also don't have any more fabric left. So my yellow satin fabric is done. I only have a tiny little bit, not enough for the lining. And the only fabric that somewhat matches the theme is this one. So this is my lining. I mean, I guess it's the lining, so it's fine, but I can't believe I did that. I cannot believe I did that. So I'm a little upset at myself, but hey, at least the costume has character now. It'll be unique. Yeah, so now we'll move on to the lining. Oh my god, I look busted, but I procrastinated in making this costume, and now it is the day before Halloween, and I am rushing but not rushing. Here's my lining. I'm going to start stitching from the lower edge all the way up to the notch, and it says to stitch within 2.5 centimeters of the notch, so that means I'll stop right here and reinforce that stitch. The lining is now put together, and now we're up to step 35, which says press under 5/8 on back opening edges of slip or lining. So that this little opening we left here, we're gonna press it under 5/8. When we sewed the center back, we went up 2.5 centimeters. I suppose it's saying to clip there where you stop sewing, and that's what I did. I clipped it. I'm not 100% sure that's what it means, but that's what I did. And now I pressed the opening under 5/8, and I'm gonna press the edges, fold it over and press to 1/4. I'm just gonna eyeball it. I'm not gonna really. Now I'm gonna do the same thing to this side. And now I'm gonna start stitching the edge. And then I'm gonna go across to make it a square. As it says, squaring. Press under 1/4 on broad edge, stitch, squaring, stitching below opening. So below opening right here, I'm gonna square that by stitching there. And I just pivot. And turn over to the other side. And there is that. Looks pretty square to me. So do the hem of the slip. I am going to do 5/8 now. This fabric is so much easier to work with. So there it is. And then I'm going to tuck it in to the crease, and then I'm going to stitch that down there. Then I'll just stitch, and there goes the hem. We're moving on to the net ruffle. To be honest, I didn't cut this out at first because I wasn't sure I was gonna need it. I didn't really understand what this was for until now that I got to this portion. So I cut out 6 strips of this, and the length that I used was 21 inches and width 10 inches. I kind of made a pattern out of one, and then I used that to trace the rest, and now I have 6 total. We are up to number 37, and it says stitch ends of net ruffles together at 3/8 1 centimeter seam, forming a circle. I'm going to take the first 2 pieces and then continue on that way. First 2. So I have to connect it now. I'm going to open this up and add another one. Open it up and add another one. Okay, here is my circle, and now it says to fold it with wrong sides together. And I'm gonna pin just to hold everything in place. So we're gonna add a gathering stitch, so a long stitch at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance on the edge here. Now we're attaching the ruffles, which at this point have been gathered, to the wrong side of the slip or of the lining. So if you grab pattern piece number 9, you'll see that it says stitching line for slip ruffle. I didn't mark that on the back of my pattern. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to measure the distance from the ruffle line to the hem line, to the hem allowance on the pattern, and that is 6 inches. So I'm going to use that measurement to determine where to pin. So I'm going to put my pin there while I find my shawl. Okay, so to begin with, I'm going to find one of the seams and attach it to where the back center is, at the center back. So first one I will attach here. This is the center back, as you can see, and right on that line I attached the seam from the gathers. I attached it there, and then I'm just going to continue going around. Okay, we're almost there. I'm starting to get excited. So I have now finished the stitching on the back facing. So this is how it looks once it's complete. This is the front, nice and squared, and here I have attached the circle, the net ruffle. We are going to attach this onto the skirt with wrong sides together, pin sides together. With wrong sides together, pin, slip to skirt, matching centers and seams. Pinned all around. On the ends, or at the center back, you will see that you'll have fabric left over because the notches are here. Make sure you match the notches. It's okay that that little bit of fabric is left over. We're going to paste and gather upper edge between notches near the center back. So again, now we're gonna run a base stitch all around using a long stitch and then gather. Okay, I'm getting ready to baste, and I'm basting right after the notch, and there's also a little marking there. Okay, so at this point I have gathered. Now we're going to attach this to the overskirt. Okay, so this is my skirt right side, and this is the overskirt. Let me tell you that the writing on that step had me really confused with right sides together, pin skirt to bodice, overskirt. That wording is just not clicking with me. So I just use common sense, and I have to place the skirt. Just let me be a little more clear. So this is the skirt that we had stoned. Here is the back slip, and here's the skirt. I have the skirt facing up. So I laid down the skirt flat, and on top, I put in the overlining with the bodice. I forgot about the overlined skirt. Just think about the bodice and the skirt itself. So the skirt is facing right, and so is the bodice. Here's the bodice, and it's facing down. This is the wrong side of the bodice. So right side to right side, we pin. And make sure you distribute the gathers all around the skirt evenly, so that we'll have a full even skirt. Let's baste it and see what it's going to look like, and then we'll put in the final stitch. Make sure there's no fabric under. Going to put in the permanent stitch now. Now that we have stitched everything into place, press this seam up to the bodice, up this way. I have my zipper here. It's a little bit longer than the recommended. The recommended for the size that I'm making, which is size 3, is 14. This one is 16, but that's okay. So the first stamp is on the left side. It says to fold over at 5/8 of an inch. I'm folding over at 5/8. I'm pressing this down all along. So this is the left side, 5/8, and then we'll do this side, the right side, at 1/2 inch. We would fold it over at 1/2 inch and press just how we did on this side. My zipper is on at this point. It will go all the way up, down, and up. To be completely honest, I am not comfortable showing you how I applied my zipper because I am not the best at applying zippers. So I did this the best that I could. I improvised a whole lot, and I just did a regular standard zipper. Now that the zipper is finally done, you would apply your flower or whatever little applique you got for the front. I don't have mine right now. I don't really have anything to put there, so I'm just gonna skip that. We move on to the last stretch of this costume, the belt. So it says stitch peplum front drape 27 and peplum back drape 29 till ends of peplum side drape 28. So let me find those pieces. I have laid out here piece number 28. I'm putting piece 27 on top. Both of the sides are now attached. And I did a zigzag stitch just to avoid the fabric from fraying. I'm going to fold it over. I have folded over and pinned with wrong sides together. We are going to baste long edges together. Baste all around here. This is now pattern piece 26. Okay, so this is the fold that we just did, and I'm just curving it. I'm just pinning it all around the curve of pattern piece 26, just like the picture shows. I'm gonna pull gently on the top fabric just to make sure that it fits along the whole rim. I am now pressing the seam. Bringing the rim up. And I'm going to press the seam down. Find the little dots that you should have marked and pin it up. It's in here, one in the middle here, and also one here. There's one in the middle. Okay, so now we're gonna add a gathering stitch all around the rim, and then also a gathering stitch here, one here, and one here. So 3 all along the side and then on the top. Gather the top. And now I'm gonna run my gathering line in the 3 markings at the bottom. And now I'll gather this one. Then the middle one. And the last side one. Grab your pattern piece 11 and press your interfacing to the back. I already did it to this piece. Once you do that, pin this. I already did one side. Pull your gathers to fit around here. There we have it, based all around this. Pressing seam towards belt, sorry. We press the seam down. Remember not to apply heat straight to organza, directly to organza. Stitch the lower edge using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And now we're gonna stitch around the top edge. Trim the seam and clip curves before flipping over so that it'll be easier. And now we are going to press the seam. And then once you do that all along, you're just gonna come back to the lower edge and press that too, and then stitch to finish off the belt. So then you would press this in, fold it in, press it, and stitch all around it. And for it to close out the belt, just run a zigzag stitch and you're done with the belt. Okay, and the belt is now complete. I am going to attach mine by hand. I'm gonna hand stitch it onto the bodice.